the Serpent and the Scepter. Egypt, Moses, and the God who writes history. In the beginning of nations, when kingdoms rose not by ballots, but by blood and brick, there stood a land carved by the hand of the Nile, Egypt, Mizraim, the kingdom of peaks and pyramids, the empire of the serpent crown and the sun god's shadow. Its temples were tall, its knowledge vast, its power unmatched. Gold flowed like river sand, monuments stabbed the sky, and kings, pharaohs, were worshipped not as rulers, but as gods. Yet while Egypt built stone for eternity, God was building something greater, a people, a promise, a prophecy. From Abraham's tent to Isaac's altar to Jacob's ladder into heaven, the covenant was unfolding. 12 sons became 12 tribes, a family destined to become a nation not born from wealth, but born from promise. And though their story begins in the land of Canaan, their shaping, their identity, their crisis, and their calling would take place in the shadow of Egypt's throne. Egypt, the cradle and the chain. Egypt was both sanctuary and slavery. It was survival from famine, yet a furnace of affliction. Joseph, betrayed, forgotten, rejected, rose to become second only to Pharaoh. What men meant for evil, God shaped for salvation. Israel grew, from family to tribe, from tribe to multitude, from sheltered guests to threatened slaves. A new king arose, the scriptures say, one who knew not Joseph, and fear birthed tyranny. Chains clattered, backs bled, cries rose, and heaven listened. For when God makes a covenant, time cannot break it. Nations cannot bury it. Kings cannot silence it. Enter Moses, the deliverer shaped by both worlds. Born under a death sentence, sent down a river in tears and hope, Moses was drawn out of the water into the courts of the very empire that sought his destruction. Raised with Egypt's science, mathematics, warfare, language, and diplomacy, yet cradled by his mother's whispered faith, he carried one identity on paper and another identity on his soul. He was raised with the scepter, but destined to contend with the serpent. He fled Egypt a fugitive, but returned a prophet. He left with a staff, but came back with authority. The clash of gods, the plagues were not random punishments, they were judgments against Egypt's gods. The Nile turned to blood, judgment on Hapi, spirit of the river. Darkness swallowed the sun, judgment on Ra, god of light. Frogs, flies, livestock, hail. Each plague a direct strike against a deity worshipped in stone and fear. This was not a battle between Moses and Pharaoh. It was Yahweh versus the spiritual forces enthroned behind Egypt's crown. For Scripture reveals that Egypt was not just political power, it was spiritual power. The serpent on the Pharaoh's brow was not decoration, it was declaration. What does this mean spiritually? Egypt represents more than a place. It is a pattern, a picture of bondage, a system of dependence, a kingdom of this world where the God of this age deceives and enslaves. Israel's journey was physical, but its meaning is eternal. Out of famine, provision, out of comfort, captivity, out of slavery, salvation, out of darkness, light out of Egypt, covenant destiny. Moses foreshadows Christ, deliverer, mediator, lawgiver, redeemer. Saved in childhood from a king's slaughter, like Jesus from Herod. Rejected by his own exiled before ministry. Returned with signs and wonders. Confronted kings, redeemed by blood. Led people out through water. Ascended a mountain to meet with God. Glowed with glory. Made covenant sealed in sacrifice. And promised, one like me shall come. Moses delivered from Egypt's chains. Jesus delivers from sin's chains. Moses broke a political yoke. Jesus breaks a spiritual one. Moses brought law on stone. Jesus writes law on hearts. Why Egypt matters for us today. because the story never stopped. Revelation speaks of spiritual Babylon, but quotes Egypt's plagues. The church is called a holy nation, just like Israel. And humanity is still enslaved, not by bricks and whips, but by fear, pride, addiction, unbelief, the need for approval, the worship of self. Pharaoh still whispers, "Stay enslaved, I own you." And God still answers, "Let my people go." The connection of the lines. You covered Judah, the royal line of Messiah. You covered the tribes, the family God multiplied. Now Egypt enters the story, not as an interruption, but as the furnace that formed them. Before Israel entered the Promised Land, they had to survive Pharaoh's land. Before the Lion of Judah roared, the Lamb had to be delivered. And before the church learns to reign, we too must learn to leave Egypt. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally. The wilderness becomes our classroom, but freedom is our identity. So this is where our journey begins, in the golden halls of Pharaoh, where gods are carved in stone and kings believe they are divine, in the cries of slaves and the calling of a burning bush, in the staff that becomes a serpent and the sea that opens like a door, in the blood on the doorposts and the fire in the night sky. This is the story of Egypt, of Moses, of Israel, and of a God who writes history not with ink, but with nations. Welcome then to the Serpent and the Scepter, where kingdoms collide, prophecy speaks, and deliverance becomes destiny. The series begins now. Let my people go.